Thank you, Zimbabwe, for tuning into yet another informative edition of your program. This is Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness, and I am Wadzanai Manyore. So this is a platform which we specifically created for our farming community here in Zimbabwe. This is where we converge with the various stakeholders in the agriculture industry. We have fertilizer manufacturers, we have the farmers who are the clients, and we also have our government making calls in terms of having being productive and production as we pave way towards achieving Vision 2030 as a country. Now, today's episode is going to be anchored on fertilizer production as we address issues in our economy such as food security, trade imbalance, export growth, to mention but a few. And to discuss this and more, I am joined by the head of tech. Her name is Elizabeth Mukojo Musimi. Elizabeth, thank you for gracing our platform with your presence today.
Thank you so much, Wadzanai, for having me.
Yes, thank you. As I highlighted earlier, this episode is anchored on fertilizer production. We are going to be talking about the nitty-gritties of fertilizer production, because if you look at it, sometimes our farmers here in Zimbabwe end up having a love-hate relationship with agriculture, whereby at times they accuse fertilizer or certain brands or the inability to produce fertilizer that is adequate or enough for their enterprises.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the production of Basal fertilizer, Basal dressing? What does it incorporate? The nutritional composition, what is it from your perspective?
Thank you so much, Wadzanai, for that question. I cannot overemphasize what you've just said. You know, it is really critical for our farmers to actually understand what it is that we do as fertilizer manufacturers and how we come up with a Basal blend. So we've got a number of Basals that are in the market. Okay. We've got the popular blend D. I think before you and I were in the Zimbabwean market, blend D has been around, and you know that's one of the most popular blends. But we've got high analysis, newer fertilizers that are available to our customers or to the Zimbabwean market, which our customers can also take use of or make use of rather. And these actually help them with their costs. So you know, farming is a business, and we want to try and emphasize that and get the farmers to understand that whenever they're selecting a fertilizer, they're also selecting profitability, you know, because when you select low analysis like your blend D, which I've given as an example, versus your double D, you know, your double D cost per hectare is normally lower as compared to a low analysis fertilizers. You know, the NPK of your blend D is 14.7, but the NPK of your double D is a 14.28.14. So that's like twice the nutrients in a D bag. So you are transporting less bags to the farm. You know, you've got less bags that you're handling generally. So your costs are low already. So farmers need to understand that, you know, when you're selecting your fertilizer, you're actually selecting profitability before you even select nutrients. And then the next thing that I also want to emphasize on is that, you know, farmers, I've heard this question being asked to me over the years that I've been in the fertilizer industry, and that is to say, can I use blend C, for instance, for another product or for another crop? Or more specifically, blend D, because D is always around. We've got it in our houses, in our farms, in our yards, and so people want to grow maybe their tobacco using a blend D, but they need to understand that there are different sources of nutrients that we select. So when we're selecting a nutrient, we are not just saying this is a maize fertilizer just for the fun of it. We select a fertilizer, we select the nutrients that we're putting in a maize blend, for instance, understanding the actual requirements of the crop. So what we're saying is, what does this crop like? Then we select those sources. What does it not like? Then we avoid those sources. So even for your tobacco, to emphasize on that, your tobacco does not like too much chlorine. So what we then end up doing is we select sources of potassium or potash that do not have chlorine, just to give it as in general terms. So to make sure that you as a farmer are selecting the right fertilizer for your crop, you have to just, if you're not sure, select the fertilizer for the crop. If I want to do tobacco, select a tobacco blend. If I want to do soya, select a soya blend. You know, that is the first thing that I think, even if after this episode is done, if I get the customers or the farmers who are listening to this today to understand that, I would have done my bit. I'll be happy with myself, because that is critical. It's very essential for you to understand. And then just maybe to add on, just to give a bit more, what we are trying to do with the Basal fertilizer is to give the crop a good start. So normally you find that we are putting phosphate at planting, and the NPKs, which are the nutrients. So when we talk NPK, we're saying nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. And in Zimbabwe, the potassium and phosphorus. The potassium is actually a potash, which is an oxide.
Okay.
And when the phosphorus is an oxide as well, and it's a phosphate. So those are the forms that we've got our fertilizers, that we declare our fertilizers in. So the NPK there comes in at the time of planting, but the phosphate normally comes in at planting because it helps the plant to establish the roots.
Okay.
So when you've got a good root system, you can imagine, we want to eat. We all eat using our mouth.
Yes.
So we want to make sure the mouth is, you don't have sores around your mouth. The mouth is ready to take in the food. So we want to make sure that the roots, are properly established at planting. So you find that most of our basals have got the phosphate in there, and then that is meant to help the crop get off to a good start.
Okay.
Just to say in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Liz. I would like to believe that your farming community, you've gathered around and you're taking notes, because Liz here is telling us that proper selection of fertilizer means that you are choosing profits. Now, Liz, as we get deeper into our discussion, I want us to talk about the top dressing for our farmers here in Zimbabwe. Like I've said earlier, farmers end up having a love-hate relationship with agriculture if they do not know the nitty-gritties of issues surrounding fertilizer application. Can you maybe take us through the fertilizer production systems when it comes to top dressing, the nutritional composition, its importance, like what you were saying earlier on Basal fertilizers?
So fertilizer application is a whole game, actually. It's a whole art.
Yes.
You are starting at planting, which is the basals that we've just spoken about, but then you go in and apply the product as you go through the season.
Yes.
And what we look at when we are trying to make sure that our fertilizer is efficient in terms of how it delivers the nutrients, and also the return, which is if you're growing your maize, your cobs, are they big enough and all that, we want to make sure that we apply the nutrients at the right time. Okay. So that is where the top dressing comes in. If you come in with your basal, it probably won't give you sufficient nutrients to be able to do what you need to do by the end of the growing season.
Okay.
So then your top dressing helps you then to fill in the gaps, and it gives you the flexibility to come in when the crop requires the nutrients.
Very true.
I mean, maize is our staple, so let's talk maize.
Yes.
Because maize is what we do every day. Maize, we are familiar with applying ammonium nitrate. We are familiar with applying urea. Muriate of potash, those are the top dressing fertilizers for maize.
Yes.
But you have to understand that you're applying it at the right time.
Okay.
So when you come in later with your top dressing, you also have to ensure that the weather conditions are also good enough. Exactly.
Yes.
Because you will then end up saying, like you just said, a love-hate relationship. I applied my ammonium nitrate, it never really worked. And it's not really about the product. It's about you as the farmer, as the customer, understanding what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve and at what time. So at times, if ammonium nitrate, for instance, it's easily leached. Okay. So if you apply it, you need moisture for it to work. But if you apply it and then you receive rains, 2 hours, heavy downpours of rains, yes. 2 hours, you've lost all the money that you've
washed away.
It's been washed away. So yes. Half of your profitability is gone. You now have to go and get more AN. I tell you, last season we had a lot of farmers who came in to then get more top dressing because of that. It's not really their fault, and you really can't bribe the weatherman to give you the exact weather. It's something that just happened. But I think it will also just help the farmers to become more profitable if they take cognizance of the fact that their weather is important, and if they can just check. The least that you can do is just check your weather. Okay. So if you can check your weather and you know that it's going to rain, or you've received rains but you're going to receive more rains, you just have to time your fertilization around that so that you at least maximize on the returns of your top dressing.
Thank you so much, Liz. There you heard it, viewers. This is Elizabeth Mukojo Msimi. Now, viewers, I understand that you were taking notes because these issues are in regards with how you will make profits at the end of the season. On that note, we are going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the second segment. Stay tuned. Welcome back, viewers. We are in the second segment of your program, and we are talking fertilizer production in line with Vision 2030. Now, viewers, we encourage you to be a part of these conversations. Feel free to get in touch with me, the producer, Wadzanai Manyore, on 0772-807-506. Alternatively, you can like our Facebook page, Agribusiness with Wadzanai. We are also now available on Twitter, and our Twitter handle there is at Agribusiness110. Now, we encourage you to leave comments and suggestions and mark a follow-up on this episode and more on our YouTube channel, Agribusiness with Wadzanai. Now, earlier on, going into the break, Elizabeth Mukojo here was telling us of the advantages that come with proper selection of proper fertilizers regarding various crops and various varieties in agriculture. We are in the second segment. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Wadzanai.
Yes. As we get into this segment, Elizabeth, I want us to talk about fertilizer that is suitable for tobacco production. If you look at United Nations Agenda Vision 2030 and Sustainable Development Goal number 12, it talks of responsible production and sustainable production. We've just received rains, and our farmers are transplanting their seedlings from the seed bed to the field. And for them to be prosperous and to be successful this season, they need to know proper fertilizer application.
Thank you
so much. Take us through that.
Thank you so much, Wadzanai. I don't know how excited I am that you actually posed this question to me, because you know tobacco is one of our main foreign currency earner in Zimbabwe. So we want to make sure that we grow it right, and the quality of the leaf is dependent on the source of the fertilizer that you're selecting.
True.
So Blend C has been around for time immemorial. I think it's been around for a long time, and it's formulated specifically for tobacco. And if you remember from the previous segment, I mentioned that tobacco, for instance, does not like a lot of chlorine. So we make sure that we select the sources that do not deliver that chlorine, because that chlorine will affect your burn, which is also a quality that affects the price that you fetch when you're going to the auction floors. So it's really important for then people to come in with the right fertilizer. So our fertilizer, we've got that Blend C. It's a 5-15-12, that's the NPK, and we also have a high C, which is a 6-28-23. But in saying that, we're not limited to those two. We actually have, I think, 4 or 5 tobacco fertilizers. We've got a 9-24-20, we've got a 10-24-20. So in case we know you've got a big land and you want to produce and stuff like that, we can come up, we can do a soil analysis, which is, I think you've spoken to a lot of agronomists who say soil analysis.
Exactly.
So, it's because it's important in terms of how you actually get the nutrients. The plant actually extracts the nutrients from the soil. So we need to understand what the soil is like, so we can help it to be able to deliver the nutrients to the crop. So that's so we can do a specific blend after a soil analysis. So for tobacco, those are the main Basal fertilizers. But we also talk top dressing. Tobacco does not like a lot of urea.
Very true.
So you don't want to use urea for your top dressing. Then you use things like ammonium nitrate. We've got calcium nitrate. Calcium is good for the leaf, just even the quality in general. So calcium nitrate is also one of them. CAN is another one. Potassium nitrate, SOP, but we're trying to select fertilizers that do not leave a chlorine. That's the main thing. There's actually a regulation on it. So we want to make sure that we do not affect the quality of our leaf when we select the wrong product. So I'm hoping after this episode, no one will go and get a D blend or a double D and try and produce tobacco.
Yes, thank you so much, Liz. It was very detailed. You are saying that proper application and proper selection of your fertilizer will also in turn reveal how your leaf at the end of the season will come out when the tobacco marketing season starts. Now, in our economy, Liz, we have issues surrounding import substitution, where farmers are being encouraged to produce crops like soya beans. Because if you look at it, we are letting go of a lot of money from our government in trying to import soya beans so that we can produce soya cake for our animals, for livestock. We are also looking at producing cooking oil using imported soya beans. I want us to talk about the proper fertilizers for soya bean production in agriculture.
The first thing that I can emphasize on Wadzanai on soya bean is that it's a nitrogen fixer. It can get its own nitrogen from the atmosphere, but you need to inoculate it, right? You need the inoculant. Then you inoculate your seeds, and then that way the crop can then start fixing its own nitrogen. Our farmers, like you said, we are a whole community. We are all Zimbabweans. We are trying to make sure that our country becomes better. So if we can all understand how to produce it, reduce the costs, get the right fertilizer, and then you're halfway through, you know. We've got two popular blends. We've got a soya blend. It's a 5-20-33.
Okay.
We also have a 5-12-24. In saying this season and last season, those were the popular blends that we're selling to most of our soya farmers. But we can come up with anything.
Okay.
We've got, I think in the market, there's also a 5-18-35. There are some people who prefer that. But those NPKs is just to make sure that we deliver the nutrients that we need, and also try to avoid the nutrients that are detrimental to the soya crop.
Okay.
So soya is actually not very expensive to produce when you compare to other, you know, crops that require a lot of fertilizer.
Very
because
true.
your application rate is around 200 kgs. If you don't have a follow-up crop, that is, if you don't have a crop that was in the land before you plant your soya, if you had potatoes and stuff like that, normally you've got sufficient nutrition.
Okay.
But so that's why we actually ask customers to do the soil test.
Okay.
So we can then say, you know what, you don't really need to put your Basal. You can come in with this top dressing and you're done. So those are the things that, you know, we really need to get our customers to understand. But basically, it's not as expensive to grow as other horticultural crops.
Very true. Speaking of horticultural crops, Liz, there are calls in terms of export growth, where we are saying that we need to export more so that we can get the much needed foreign currency. At the moment, tobacco is the major foreign currency earner in agriculture. I want us to talk about fertilizers that can do for certain horticultural crops that you will pick. We have our sugar snap peas, we have our lettuce, we have our cherry tomatoes. Just a few in general, what you can highlight in terms of fertilizers that are appropriate for horticultural crops meant for export.
Yeah, so basically what Zanai is a rule of thumb, I know we're limited for time.
Yes.
If you're not sure of what fertilizer to use for your horticultural crop, use a tobacco blend. Because most of our horticultural crops actually also have a salt sensitivity issue. So we want to try and reduce the chloride content or the chlorine content that I've been emphasizing on.
Yes.
So if you're not sure, go for a blend C, go for a high C, you know. And those are the fertilizers that are used mainly for horticulture, for most of the horticultural crops.
Very true.
But then you just also add on potatoes. You know, we've got potato blends that are specific for potatoes. So potatoes actually have a high potash requirement. So you'll find that a potato blend has a high requirement for potassium, and our potato blends have got high potash.
Okay.
So for instance, the popular one that we've got is a 6-18-24. So it's got 24%. The highest composition in the fertilizer is potash, because it's got a high demand for potash. And even after you've planted, you come in with SOP, which is a potash source as well. You can come in with potassium nitrate, depending on how your program has been structured.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, we're trying to ensure that whatever it is that we're applying is the right thing for the horticultural crop.
Okay, thank you so much, Liz. It was very detailed. There you heard it, farmers. For those who want to venture into horticultural production, she is saying if you are not sure, in general, you can liaise with the tobacco blend, because they usually go hand in hand. Now, viewers, we're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the third and final segment. Stay tuned. Welcome back, viewers. We are watching Agricultural New Directions, and I am Wadzanai Manyore. Today I have taken the liberty of inviting Elizabeth Mukojo Musimi. We are in the third and final segment, and earlier on prior to the break, Elizabeth was talking to us about tobacco fertilizers, soybean fertilizers, and even horticultural crop fertilizers. Now, as we are rounding off our episode, Elizabeth, I want us to talk about the relationship between proper fertilizer application, or the proper fertilizer type with irrigation, your water regimen. There should be a relationship between the two. What is it like? Your sentiments on that?
So irrigation scheduling, like you've just said, is really critical. We need to make sure that, you know, fertilizer, you need water to be able to deliver the nutrients. You can't, that's why you find when you apply too much ammonium nitrate and it's hot, you have problems, because now there's more water in the plant than there is outside. And the concentration, there's a lot of concentration salts outside. So the water moves the other ways. Simple science, I think we did in science
in biology.
Well. Exactly. So you find that you need to be sure, like when you apply your fertilizer, you need to know that you're going to then come in with your irrigation and ensure that, you know, there's no fertilizer ban. Because if you do not plan your scheduling properly and you apply your fertilizer, then you have a problem, because you have wilting. And then now at the end of the day, instead of the fertilizer delivering the nutrients, it's causing all sorts of problems in the plant. And this is not what we want. We want to make sure that there is sufficient moisture for the fertilizer to dissolve, and when the fertilizer dissolves, then the crop can take up the nutrients, and then we've got a good and happy crop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of fertilizer, relationship with other factors of production, I want us to talk about the proper fertilizer application and its relationship or its effects on issues surrounding pest and disease attacks in crops. What is it like, say, for a farmer who is properly applying their fertilizer in a certain crop? What is it like, its effects on pest and disease? Because pest and disease are a nuisance, they can eat into our profits or our yields. Can you take us through that?
So that's a very critical angle that you've just brought up, Wadzanai, because it's not just about applying the fertilizer. It's about getting the crop to be in the state in which it can fight off diseases. This is something I think maybe that most farmers actually might not know, or if they do, they underrate the level at which it can improve their profitability.
Very true.
Because if you've got a healthy crop, it can fight off diseases. And it comes from the proper application of fertilizers.
Very true.
So if you also over apply, there are other crops that won't mind,
Exactly.
They will take the nutrition, but they will never then give you the return that you're looking for. You've lost money, you've applied fertilizer that you don't need.
You are not talking of the diseconomies of scale.
Exactly.
You have over applied, but your output has remained constant.
Exactly.
Okay?
So if you over apply, there are other crops, like I've just said, will take the nutrient, and they do luxury consumption. They will just have it, but there won't be a negative effect. But at times there are negative effects. This is what I'm driving at, to say, if you apply nitrogen as one nutrient, that is very common. If you apply too much of it, you are actually weakening your crop.
Okay.
So your crop is weaker and it cannot fight off diseases. You've spent a lot of money on the fertilizer. Now you have to spend a lot of money on the nutrition, on the crop protection side. So that's already a problem in terms of your cost of production. They're already high, and you probably won't even succeed at times if you do it wrong. So it's really important to apply what the crop needs, exactly what it requires, not over, not under. Because when we do that, we've fought off the pest and diseases.
Thank you so much, Liz. As we are getting into this rainy season, most of our farmers are running around. Some of them like headless chickens, looking for fertilizers.
That's true.
I want you to give us a word of advice, your recommendations to our farming community here in Zimbabwe in terms of adapting proper application or fertilizer regimens. Because we understand, like I've said earlier on, some farmers are running around, and yet they will end up, that's where we will have scenarios of someone taking a tobacco blend for maize, saying that as long as it's fertilizer, I can make it. Your word of advice, what is very critical, those factors that a farmer needs to take cognizance of if he's going to succeed this 2021-2022 growing season? So
this year they've said it's going to be a very wet year, like last year. So that's a good thing for us as agronomists. We like it, because then that means our farmers will be successful, and we won't have headaches, because when your farmer does not do well, you're also in stress. But what I'm just trying to say is, if you are applying your fertilizers right, I'll talk of potash. That's one nutrient, going into dryland, especially customers or farmers who are into dryland farming.
Yes.
If you have episodes of, limited rainfall, if you've got sufficient potassium helps with your drought tolerance. But some farmers actually might not have known this, because I think people which is true, it's a varietal trait where you have a drought tolerant variety, but you also then can enhance, the drought tolerance of a crop by just making sure the potash is right.
Okay.
And just to sum it all up, remember that you have to select the fertilizer for the crop.
Okay.
Please, let's not switch. And at times I get farmers who come to me and say, Liz, but this is what I've got. I have to use this.
This is my last option.
Exactly. And I can't say to them, it's okay for you to use the product. That's not right. I can't say that to them. I will say, you know what? This is what wrong. You're supposed to be doing.
Yes.
And I think if there's anything that, people can take away from this episode, is to remember that a fertilizer is not just blended just for the fun of it.
Okay.
We blend specifically for the crop. And so if you're not sure, please check the bag. What does it say? Which crop is it for? And just use it for the crop if you're not sure of what else you can use it for.
Thank you so much, Liz. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
It was a pleasure having you as well, Wadzanai.
Thank you. Now, these are issues that talk to our economy as a country as we pave way towards Achieve Vision 2030. Now, it is evident and indisputable that the government of Zimbabwe remains dedicated to issues around food and nutrition. It was a pleasure having you with us today, our viewers, and I understand you took one or two from this discussion. From me, Wadzanai Manyore. I'm also on Instagram. It's a W Manyore. And Mukoma Dani Daniel Muranganwa. Have yourselves a fabulous evening. Thank you for watching.